Hello, this is Joe Peters from MOMFIT with Joe Peters. Welcome to the Spanglish Network and Single TV Network on channels 250 and 251. Please remember to download both the Single TV app in the respective apps, iOS and Android devices. While you are downloading, make sure that you rate and leave a comment. The app is free. The Single TV is also available in Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire TV Stick, Roku, and Roku Stick in all the smart TVs since 2016. Welcome to MOMFIT. Today we have a very, very special guest that is coming, and this is the reality, right? This is a MOMFIT program made by moms for moms. And that is what happens in the life of moms. So she's stuck in traffic and is coming in the next couple of months. No, I'm not going to make you wait for a month, but in the next couple of minutes. And as she is coming in, I want to introduce her to you, and then have the story. She's coming to my house because she's a very close friend of mine that become a friend of mine as I prepare myself for pregnancy. And in the journey that I was going through, that a lot of you start hearing, and you are hearing me over and over and over and over again, telling you about how important it is to have a team around us that support and help us to thrive. So I was walking the talk because I will not be a good coach. I will not be a good coach if it was better, if I will not walk the talk. So what I did was I started creating my own team, my own support team. And that in that support team, what I did was I started looking for people that get alignment with my vision and goals. And I found Poppy. Poppy is actually a doula, a prenatal and postnatal doula, and she started helping me with preparing for birth. One of the most important things that I'm going to share with you as she's arriving in a couple of minutes is how important is not only getting any doula. Like, I will tell you my story. I interview 6 doulas because some of us that are first time moms will think, oh, well, I will just get in Google or in Facebook a doula and book it. Actually, the work of a doula is to be your cheerleader, to be there next to you, to help you to feel confident throughout the pregnancy, the birth, and even the postpartum. So if you think about it, is that person almost like, I don't know if you remember Pinocchio, that little Greek cricket in the shoulder of Pinocchio's dad that will always whisper something. Imagine how annoying would be you to have that little cricket with a personality, a voice that doesn't resonate with you, that doesn't support you, that doesn't feel good for you. It will it will not be able to do their job. So finding a doula that resonates with you, finding a doula that helps you to actually thrive, that you have chemistry, is halfway through the process. I actually will tell you my own story. When we meet her in a prenatal course that we were taking with my husband. And it was a 8-hour course. And then she shared that she was a doula. I was super excited. I was like, I like her energy. I like how she talks. I like how she trains. But then my husband is a very introvert person. And one of the things that was my concern on that moment was I was not sure how my birth experience was going to happen. I didn't knew how it was going to be. But I knew one thing. I knew that my husband doesn't feel very good making confrontation. So I knew if I knew at some point during birth to have somebody that speak up for me, I knew my husband will not be that person because my husband don't like confrontation. He will feel very awkward, challenging, or questioning the brain. Like, remember that we talk about benefit, risk, alternatives, intuition, waiting to a doctor. So I saw this woman with a lot of power, with a lot of energy. So, like, this is somebody that I want next to me and Justin. And then when we finished, I told Justin, and Justin was like, she had a little bit too much energy for me. That'll be a little overwhelming for me. And then I smile and we talk about it, but then we decide that she was going to be there for me and my baby. And then we decide to actually ask her if she would like to be our doula. And then we start this beautiful relationship for a long, long time now. It's almost going to be a year and a half, where we start not only knowing each other as client and provider, but also as moms and also as friends. And to have her today with us, when she lives an hour away from here, and she decided to drive all the way here to be live with me on the MOMFIT program. And I'm very honored because she also is a advocate for birth justice. She's also an advocate and a spoken person about equality and justice on maternal matters. That is important. Why? Because each of us as moms, it's important that I start realizing what is going on in the world around being a mom, around having the power to move and get close to what we really deserve as moms overall. Because the reality is, some of us don't have a clue of what is happening with other moms and what is happening in the world of motherhood. And what we're going to be talking today is especially about that, is about giving us that awareness of what each of us can do, how we can bring awareness and insight into what we are doing as a community, as a society, to support moms. A lot of you know me and know that I've been telling you this a long time since I went to Africa. One of the most powerful things that Africa is that I was able to see the true meaning of community, the true meaning of support, the true meaning of a mom not being alone, the true meaning of a mom having a tribe and a support system behind her. A lot of you have been hearing the story of me being in the middle of Africa, in the middle of nowhere, living with the Hadza for some time, and then being in the village with them and seeing the kids going around without knowing which kid belonged to which mom, because they all have a tribe and a community. That is why I create MOMFIT, because I want to help us to create that community. And part of that community responsibility is knowing everything that is going on and happen around motherhood and birth, not only for us and the people close to us, but overall in society. Because we as moms had actually more power than what we believe. Sometimes we don't believe that we have that level of power, but we always can influence what is going on around us and with us. And that is part of what we're going to be talking today with her, and start learning about what we can do to actually speak up with knowledge, with data, with wisdom, and from a place of love and caring, not only for ourselves but for all those other mamas. And she's here. I'm happy to introduce all of you to my beautiful and amazing friend, Miss Poppy.
Hi.
I was just talking with them a little bit about you and what are you doing, and I'm happy to help you to share your message. And I would love if you can start just sharing with us a little bit about what we're going to be talking today and why that is very close to your heart.
So, what we're going to talk about today is the mortality rate in our pregnant and postpartum moms. And we're going to talk about why it is so high, specifically in the United States. It's more dangerous to give birth in the United States than it is to give birth in Mexico, which surprises a lot of people, especially a lot of people here in the United States that feel like there's no way I could go into the hospital and potentially die or like what are the choices? So we're going to talk about, what are some of the causes behind such high rates and what we can do about it, and what we can do to keep ourselves safe, and why it doesn't have to be so scary. It seems like a really big, scary thing, and especially when we start talking about numbers, but it doesn't have to be, and because we have ways that we can keep ourselves safe. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
I'm so happy to have you here because it's such an important topic. What we were talking before is not only us feeling the privilege and the probably bubble to never know about it,
Yeah.
but also as we get the awareness and the knowledge about what is happening, we as mamas can actually do something about it and help and support so that those numbers go down, not only for the people that has been impacting, but for every mama, because there is not one mama that deserves to go to a hospital to bring their precious baby home with them and then die there.
Yeah.
So let's start.
Yeah, and what I actually just learned a new statistic this morning, because this isn't just a United States thing. This is a global issue. And what the World Health Organization has said is that if we could increase the number of midwives by 20% throughout the world, we can decrease the number of maternal mortality rates by 50%.
Wow.
And it's so that, like, when I heard that, I was like, it's something as simple as bringing healthcare access to people. And that's really one of the biggest things that we can do, is like just help people get access to good prenatal healthcare, good postpartum healthcare, and let them know that they're important, and that while birth is very natural and it's a wonderful thing to experience, there's also a lot that we have to be mindful of. So.
And one of the things that I wanted to ask you to go deeper, because this is a question that we always have, and I always have from my mamas, and that is, what is the difference between a midwife and a OGB, or why I should choose one or the other, or if there is an option. So if you can walk, because some of you know, because of my story, I choose to work with puppy and a midwife, and was the best decision that I make. So why we don't elaborate a little bit on that small difference, so some of these moms to be have that information available.
So, well, the first thing I'll just say is an OBGYN is a trained surgeon. That's number one. Like they are your medical professional that is trained specifically for surgery. And so like that's, but we go to them for our, traditional healthcare. So we can go to them for, our pap smears and all of those things, but it's also like they're usually associated with a hospital system. And they're very medically based. Whereas midwives, they are also trained medical professionals. So I want to put that out there. They're trained, certified, licensed medical professionals that have to adhere to a certain amount of standards, just like our OBGYNs do, but they're more naturally minded often. They most often will believe in our body's natural ability to birth. And so they are there to support women in ways that make sense for them to connect with their bodies and their babies in ways that help facilitate the natural processes of birth. And often, and this is mostly, anecdotal, but midwives often spend more time with their clients because they're not bound by many of the insurance regulations that our OBGYNs are put on. So you get usually more personal care with your midwife, and they have often more visits, and you have more consistency of care often with a midwife, because with our doctors, with the way our healthcare system is set up here in the United States, and I think in many places across the world, you can go to a practice and there's several doctors all doing the same thing, and you never know. You could be seeing the same doctor for pretty much all of your pregnancy, and then get into the hospital and it could be a whole different doctor on call that delivers your baby. Whereas with midwives, we often will see the same midwife who then is on call for our birth, and we have a better chance of having the person that nurtured us during our pregnancy deliver our baby.
And that is a little off topic, but I think that Poppy put something very specific that I want to make sure that all of you moms to be know this. These are the kind of questions that we want you to ask your medical provider. Mm-hmm. So this is not a surprise for you. So you are not expecting to be with one person your entire pregnancy, and then surprise, 2 weeks before your due date, you are like, oh, that person is not on call, so it's going to be a stranger doing the final part of the journey. So these are the kind of thing that is good that you know. So you take notes, and then you say, hey, are you going to be the one going into birth with me? If not, okay, can I have remember brain? Can I have other options? Can I meet some of the other people that are going to be working. So
Yeah.
I'm not saying, hey, nice to meet you, help me to push my baby out,
Right.
but you have at least a connection before. So, Papi, let's gonna start on the mortality and some of the topics that are around this topic that may seem a little heavy, but is so needed to be speak of, because sometimes, because it feels so heavy on, nobody wants to talk about mortality when you are talking about a pregnant woman and a baby, but because of that, not a lot of people is talking about that, and that is why it's so important what you are doing. So let's start with
Absolutely. So pre-COVID, so in 2020, so this was the last time that I have accurate numbers. In that year alone, 861 women died during childbirth or within the first year. So that's 861 women in 1 year. That's 23.8 deaths per every 100,000 women. We have 100,000 women in our region alone. And so 23 of those women died last year. And so like, to me, that's staggering. That's absolutely staggering. So, and that's, that is across the United States. What I also want to note is that women of color, so our African American mamas, our Latin American mamas, these women are dying 3 to 4% higher rates than our Caucasian women. And it has nothing to do with education. It has nothing to do with socioeconomic factors. It has everything to do with things that are so deeply ingrained, not only in our society, but in our healthcare system, that it's almost like, how can we make change when we see such disparities? And they're so hidden in many ways. So that also was pretty staggering. Like 53 out of every 100,000 Black women will die in their, during childbirth.
Wow,
in their
almost
postpartum.
twice as the average.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
and on that one of the things that is important to know is, because some of you may be thinking, well, why that applies to me. But then one of the things that happened, and one of the things why I know Poppy is an advocate of this, and MOMFIT we're an advocate of this, is we are in a point in society with society is being taken apart, the community around being a mom and having motherhood support. And then it's our job as mamas to say, no, what happened to that mama is happening to me. Because we are the pillar of society. Like if you think about it, if we stop having babies, humanity will die in two generations. So it is actually a matter of all of us to be aware of it, and then to actually start thinking and questioning what I can do, how I can bring awareness, how I can put my 2 grains on support on this issue.
So what it is all of our issue, because 60% of all maternal mortality deaths are preventable. So what that means is, how, like, if we know that 60% of them are preventable because it's hemorrhage, because it's access to healthcare like within a reasonable amount of time, if it's postpartum depression, which is killing our mamas, if it's heart conditions, if we have ways to prevent these deaths, that's an everybody issue. Because these, like, when you hear me talk about hemorrhage, when you hear me talk about heart issues, when you hear me talk about postpartum depression, those are all things that we could all be susceptible to, even if we didn't have any symptoms prior pregnancy. So we have to just at least be aware of the risks, because it could go very much from, this is not my problem, to, oh my gosh, this is my problem, or this is my sister's problem, or this is my auntie's problem, or my daughter's problem.
Absolutely. And a lot of you know that that this, because we talk about it, and we will be talking about this deeper in another session, but a lot of you know that I had a beautiful pregnancy. I had a beautiful birth with support from Poppy. And then in the 4th trimester, it hit me really hard with the postpartum depression. And I can testify on that one specifically. Postpartum depression is a dark, dark place. Like I suffered from depression 20 years. And in those 20 years, I never felt the things that I felt and thought the things that I thought during postpartum depression. So absolutely, it's something that is preventable and something that we can do things about it, and then we can create an impact. Because it's right, like I was thinking about things that are happening in the States and the last 2 weeks, and unfortunately our society is predisposed to say it's not my problem until hit my house,
Yes.
until hit close to me, until it's my hometown, until I have children so I can identify, until my friend is the one that died from a hemorrhage that could be avoided. And that is crazy, because if we wait until it's in our house, that means that it's too late. Because if it's already in our house, then we are going through the sorrow and the pain of going through that experience.
Yeah. And, and I can also, I mean, we think about, we don't expect these things. We go home from the hospital, right? We know they've checked all their boxes, because that's, hospitals have their checklist. Is that enough? We've been able to go to the bathroom. We've been able to move around. We have gotten our baby to latch a few times, maybe, and they're just like, okay, you got it from here. We'll send you home. You're all right. And, they're like, follow up with your doctor, whoever that might be, in 2 weeks, and they don't really give you a whole lot more information. And so when you're in those dark times, you're like, is this normal? What am I supposed to do? Who am I supposed to call? What are my options here? Like, I might be going crazy. And so we need community. We need people that, even if this, hasn't affected you in your home directly, you're at least aware, so that when it affects your neighbor's home, your sister's home, you're like, oh my gosh, like, I know this is a real thing. I can validate, I can acknowledge, and we can help advocate for your mental health care, your physical health care. And we got it as sisters. We got it.
Absolutely. I love that. As sisters, we got it. Well, I was actually talking with a couple of mamas, and I had to get everything in my power to not flip out, because this was a beautiful mama that was struggling with, she had some very traumatic birth, and then was struggling with some anxiety postpartum. And then her boss, in one of the comments, asked her, in one of the texts, when you're coming back from your vacation, referring to her maternal leave. And then she just was in tears sharing with us, like how I can make him understand that this is the hardest time that I ever been through in my entire life, and here he is thinking that this is my vacation. So a simple thing like that, if we are aware of that, if you are hearing a male or a female referring like that to a maternal leave, that is a moment to step up and speak up. It's not thinking, oh, it's not talking to me, so it's not my business. It's saying like, hey, I hear that you were referring to maternity leave as a vacation, and I want to tell you that I feel really uncomfortable with that, because I, as a mom, know that maternity leave is anything but a vacation for a mom.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know if many vacations where you go for 6 to 8 weeks running on maybe 4 hours of sleep a day. You know what I mean? And that's what it looks like for a lot of moms. That's not a vacation. I don't know many vacations where you could go 12 hours and just forget to eat, because you've been taking care of the baby, and you've been trying to get the sleep, and you've been trying to entertain all the people that just happen to come to your house because you do that. It's that's not a vacation. And we definitely need to like spread the word that it is not a vacation. Like, this is recovery. Our bodies do so much expansion during our pregnancy, and this is our time for our bodies to close back up and heal, and for our hearts to heal and our souls to heal from having such a big immersive experience. And that is also not a vacation.
Absolutely. One of the things I love on that topic, and Poppy helped me a lot with this, I have my baby, is if we are able to show the mamas the kindness and the care that we show the newborns, things will be so different. Because the reality is, a mom of a newborn is also a newborn. So they go to the hospital and they came home with two newborns, the baby and the mama. The mama is learning to be, even if it's not their first baby, even if it's their baby number 5, every baby is different. So the mama is also a newborn. She's also learning to be a mom.
Yeah. And one of the things that I continue to tell my clients is like, this is a new relationship, just like any new relationship. The relationship between mother and child, while many people will say, oh, it comes naturally. I don't know any new relationship that comes naturally. It's a matter of continually communicating, getting to know one another and their personalities and preferences. Even our newborns have preferences. And, so one of the things that we have to understand as observers, as people on the outside, is that, that mom is doing so much work getting to know her baby, and her baby is doing so much work getting to know her. And that is her focus. And so we have to be there as supporters and observers and as lovers of these mamas, that we trust that you're going to take care of your baby, but who's taking care of you? That is our opportunity to make sure that you are taken care of. And that's what we can do as a community, is make sure that our postpartum moms feel fully supported, and not just our postpartum moms, but our moms who are pregnant as well. One of the things that we also know is that like 6% of African American women don't actually get any kind of prenatal care or support until their third trimester. And a lot of that is just based on, one, availability of healthcare services in their area. Two, knowledge, knowing that they maybe even should. If they had a friend or a sister that had a baby and is like, have you been to the doctor yet? That might instigate them to get to the doctor, but they don't have those people and saying, you should probably go see a midwife. Like, why don't you go get checked out? Like, let's, check. It's not okay to be so swollen, ice chip all the time. We need those conversations with our community and our support, just to make sure that like people are getting the services that they need. And the only way they know to do it is if someone tells them to.
Absolutely. And one of the powerful things about all this is the feeling of empowerment. Yes, it's like this. Sometimes we feel that we are hopeless, that we are at the mercy of luck, or at the mercy of what is going to happen to us or to the people that we love. And then, Papi, why you don't just talk on what are some of those tools that we have to actually get that power back into us and our moms' communities?
This is one of my favorite aspects of this topic, is one of the primary things that we can do to empower us is education. Knowledge is power. Education around our bodies, education around our healthcare system, and the system in which we choose to birth. Your choice is yours. No one's going to pressure you into choosing a midwife or choosing a doctor, choosing a home birth or choosing a hospital birth. Those are all very real preferences, and that's up for you to make. But use your information to make those decisions, right? So call the hospital and say, hey, what is your cesarean rate? Make sure that you're comfortable with that rate of cesarean. If there's other hospitals in the area, maybe find one that has a lower rate. Or, just as Joanna had said, talk to your healthcare provider. Like, are you going to be the one that's on call? So, learn these different things. And, it's even okay to ask, like, what is your policy on breech birth? What is your policy on just the different, like, on induction? At what point will you induce a mama? At what point do you, say a cesarean is necessary? So these are just questions that you can ask, but informed decision making is super duper important. Hospitals do have childbirth education classes, and I do recommend them, but know that they're going to be hospital based. They're going to be really kind of biased in helping you make choices that are right for them within their system. But then there's also, doulas, childbirth educators, different birthing organizations that also offer training for expectant parents. So, go ahead and take as many classes as you can, workshops, there's master classes online, things like that, so that you can really have a truly informed message on what's going on in your body and what your choices and options are during pregnancy and birth. But even more than that, informed consent and decision making. And so ask as many questions to every single healthcare provider you talk to, your midwife, your nurses, the resident that comes into the room while you're having your baby. And then If anyone is taking notes, this next part is probably the most important thing that you can take notes on. And it talks about informed decision making, the method that we can use to ensure that we have all the information necessary to make the best choice for us is simply by using our brains. And this is an acronym: BRAINS. Right? So B, anytime someone approaches you with a potential procedure or even medical test, anytime a doctor wants to lay hands on you for any reasons or a medical professional wants to do anything to you, ask first, what are the benefits? What are the benefits of having this procedure done or having this test done? What are the benefits to me? What are the benefits to baby? What are the benefits? That's B. R is, what are the risks? So, what are the risks of the procedure? Like, let's ask that. Not, they're going to be so quick to tell you what the risks of not having the procedure are. So, I want to know, what are the risks of this procedure? What are the risks of this test? What are the risks? That's what we want to know first. And then, secondarily, what are the risks of not taking action? What are the risks of not having this test done? What are the risks of having this procedure done? So, R is risks. A is alternatives. What are the alternatives to this procedure or to this test? Are there natural alternatives? Is there something I can pursue naturally before we have to do this? Or are there other medical alternatives? That might be an option too. But alternatives is A. What are the alternatives? I is intuition. Women, ladies, friends, listen to your gut, man. Listen. What does your belly, what does your intuition tell you about what is being presented to you? How do you feel? Like, if someone's telling you, I feel like you should probably go on bed rest for the next 4 to 6 weeks, what does your heart tell you about that? How do you feel inside? What is your intuition telling you? Does your intuition telling you to get a second opinion? Does your intuition tell you to, maybe trust? Sometimes that's the answer. Trust the doctor, trust the midwife. Does your intuition tell you to maybe wait a little bit? What does your intuition tell you? N is nothing. Do nothing. What happens if we do nothing? And that doesn't necessarily mean do nothing ever. That could mean do nothing right now. What happens if we just take a 5-minute pause? What happens if we do nothing for 5 minutes? What happens if we do nothing for the next hour and kind of wait and see? And then what happens if we do nothing at all? What are the risks of, to me, what are the risks to baby if we do nothing? And then S, this is the last one, smile. Do it with a smile, because when we can encourage these conversations, and that's really what it is, when we can encourage these conversations with our clinical care team, our midwives, our doulas, our doctors, when we can do it with a way that feels conversational and not oppositional, then we get much better results. Our doctors, our care providers' walls come down. They feel welcome to share their knowledge, and often they're excited to dig into depths of their mind and of their training and of their learning that they don't often have the opportunity to, because not everyone asks these questions. And so they often will get excited to say, yes, there are alternatives. And you're right, like, this isn't in alignment, and let's try this. And so, like, do it with a smile so we can encourage conversation.
I love that S, because I talk a lot about brain, but I will start incorporating the brains with an S.
Yeah.
3 things that I want to share with all of you. The first one, so the 3 things is, one of my clients actually was having a long birth, and then her doctor was ready to get into a C-section, and she remembered brain. And then in the middle of that, she said, like, well, what is the benefit, the risk, all that? And then say, what happened if we wait a little longer? I feel
Yes.
that my baby is coming, may not be as soon as you want, but what will happen? And then the doctor was like, okay, we can wait for another hour. And then if in an hour you are still not moving forward, then we will have to go into a C-section. This was her being in her way to the room. They move her back into her room. within 45 minutes she gave birth to her baby.
Good.
So that is one of the things of the power of actually doing it. And example for me is when I was with Poppy, they want me to start pushing, and we did a brief thing of brain, and I'm like, I don't feel comfortable with that. What is the alternative? Can we wait? And we decide to wait, and then I was able to push when my body was ready, not when the medical team was ready for it. But I want to ask you about two things interesting. The first one is, why is important to know the percentage of cesarean rate if we are talking in a hospital? And then the second one is, why is important to make the brain every time that we are going to have something being done with us, or a, how you call that, intervention. So what is the sequence and the result of higher interventions, and why is it important to have a rate of C-section on where you are going?
Yeah, well, the topic of today's conversation is maternal mortality rate. So that, right there, women who have surgery are more likely to die during surgery or during the postpartum. So that's number one. The risk for maternal mortality rate increases when we do major abdominal surgery. And that's because one, hemorrhage is more likely. Two, postpartum healing is more difficult. Three, postpartum depression is more likely in women who have had cesareans. So that's why it's really important to understand the hospital's cesarean rate, because it does increase the chances of further complications down the line. And that's also why it's important to have and use the brains method for every single time they want to come in and do a procedure or an intervention, because there's what they call the cascade of interventions. One intervention will often have consequences that will lead to other interventions, which will then have consequences that will lead to other interventions. And the more interventions we have, the greater we increase the risk to both our mothers and our babies of having complications. So if we can understand that there might be options that can prevent the cesarean or prevent the interventions, then we can also prevent further complications down the line, including but not limited to our maternal mortality rate.
Thank you so much for that. And one important thing about that Poppy was saying, she was talking about why it's important to know the rate. The other part that is important that I want all of you to know is that different doctors and different hospitals have different rates, and that also is I will say, proof or an indication of how prompt that doctor is to take the C-section as the option. So if I see a doctor that, I don't know, 50%, 60% of the time it had a C-section, then that tells me as a mom that that doctor is going to be a lot more prompt into convince me and talk to me about a C-section, that if I find a doctor that had a 10% rate or an 8% rate. So it is also important to know that, because like I was telling you, when I hired Poppy, it's as important to have chemistry with your doula as it's important to have chemistry with your doctor or your midwife, and know that they are aligned with your desire. So if you're a mama that is already in your mind that you want a C-section and that is what will work for you, good for you, mama. If you are a mama that want to experience a natural birth, having those rates is important, because then you need to know that that doctor is in the same page of you, and that that doctor is going to actually do a lot of other things before they go into the option of a C-section.
Yeah. And, and that's kind of why, too, I started the conversation just talking about the difference between doctors and midwives, OBGYNs and midwives. And again, OBGYNs are trained surgeons. And so, yes, I don't want to ever invalidate or discredit the importance of having these people, because there are very real situations in which cesarean will save a life, will save the life of a baby, will save the life of a mom. And so I want to make it very clear. I am so thankful for our clinical care team and as far as our surgeons go. And, so, cesarean was very necessary for, the survival of my son and the stress that it was. So I won't go into all the reasons, but it was necessary for my son. The cesarean was very well.
things that I'm gonna try to see if as a connection, because my producer is saying that we are okay, that we are back on track. Uh, Hopefully, we are going better now. Let me see if I can change this. Okay. Um, okay, and because one of the things that is important that I want to talk about this, because because I know you, that your daughter is younger than your son.
Yes.
And then it was interesting that you say that your daughter's C-section was preventable, because a lot of us mamas hear that once you have a C-section, all your other babies need to be a C-section, and it just go by default. So, what you're telling me is that that's not completely true.
No, it is not completely true. So there's two different situations here that I want to talk about. I'll talk about mine second because it's the least common of the reason why my daughter's cesarean was preventable. The first and most preventable reason, like once you have a C-section, you do not always have to have a C-section. So there are certain situations in which it's a little bit more risky. But what we are seeing and what the evidence shows is that it's actually almost just as safe. It's within a 0.02%. And as far as the safetiness goes, that it's just as safe to have a vaginal birth after cesarean. So you can have a vaginal birth after cesarean just as safely as it would be to have a vaginal birth otherwise. So you can definitely still have a vaginal birth as long as you have waited for your cesarean scarring, internal and external, to heal. You won't risk rupture. Your risk of rupture isn't as high as what they'll scare you into thinking it is. And it's definitely just as safe. We heal. Our bodies are miraculous that way. And just because, and even if you've had 2 cesareans, your third can be a vaginal birth. It is possible. Make sure that if you've had a cesarean before and you would like to maybe not have a cesarean this time, when you're talking to your midwife or when you're talking to your clinical care provider, ask them, what is your perspective on VBACs? In which situations are you comfortable with providing VBAC delivery? And which situations are you comfortable with not providing VBAC delivery? So that is number one. So VBACs, vaginal birth after cesarean, is completely possible when the mom's pregnancy is healthy, when mom is healthy, when baby is healthy. So those are the times, and that's like what 90% of all pregnancies are healthy. So in which case, vaginal birth after cesarean is very possible. Now, mine, however, was a situation in which it could have been prevented because of the way that my son's cesarean was performed. So I will say I was 19 years old when I was pregnant with my son. I was one of those high school sweethearts, married fresh out of high school and then pregnant the year after. And we only had one OBGYN practice in my entire town. So the doctor that I went to is the same doctor that delivered my mom, and she was going to be delivering, and delivered me. So this doctor had been in practice as long as back as my mom's birth, my birth, and was now going to be delivering my baby, which on the surface, it sounds romantic and sweet, right? Like, oh, it's a family lineage thing. Except for this doctor was in his 60s, very close to retirement, and hadn't updated his practices since. I didn't know to ask any of these things, like, what is your perspective on forceps and vacuum delivery, because he was going to use both of those on my son. That would have been very traumatic. I didn't know to ask him how he's continued his education or what his philosophies are on cesareans. And I didn't ask, because I didn't ask, I didn't know that they weren't updated. And so while yes, my cesarean with Gavin was necessary, the way that he performed my cesarean was not okay. So he used the same cesarean technique that they were using when they first determined that VBACs were unsafe. And that's when they cut your uterus vertically. Now they'll cut through the belly and the uterus horizontally. They'll make like what they call the smiley face. And But many years ago, when they were doing cesareans, they did not. And so once your uterus has been cut vertically, you do have a much higher risk of uterine rupture. So having a vaginal birth after cesarean is not going to be possible. So because I didn't make an informed choice with my first birth, my choices were taken from me my second birth.
And that is so powerful, because we are going to go back into the topic here, but this is so fascinating because one of the things that is very important that I want all of you to know is hear the way that Poppy talk about this. She say, because she take responsibility because I didn't make informed decisions on my first time, my choices were taken away from me. So it's not about mom guilt, it's not about mom shame, it's not about feeling bad about it. It's about having a right balance between what is our responsibility, and then after that, what is the impact of that. And sometimes that things are taken away from us. And then as we know that, it's important that we all start advocating to also learn and know. That is something that you hear me say every Friday. I don't want you to wait until you are 9 months pregnant to start learning about this. I don't want you to wait until you are in postpartum to actually learn about the fourth trimester.
Yeah.
If you can start learning in the first trimester about all of this, as more you learn about it, as more you get confident about it, as more you feel empowered about knowing what you are talking about, as more you are going to be able to actually create the experience and the birth and the maternity experience that you deserve and that your baby deserve, not letting it to the rolling the dice and see what is happening.
Yeah, absolutely.
What else we can do on the topic of mortality on mamas, and how we as a society can prevent it? What are some of the other things in addition to the inform and the knowledge as power? What are other things that we all can not only make sure that is not happening to us or that our risk is as low as possible, but how we can actually start actually impacting some of those less favorable communities where they are not having as much access as us.
And that's exactly it. Like, that's what we need to do. We need to focus on the communities where they don't have the access to the prenatal and postpartum care that we have. And even in bigger cities, I think about Cleveland, for instance. Cities with busing systems, often the systems are broken. And so women who try to get to their appointments just simply can't get to their appointments. We need to make healthcare way more accessible for people throughout the world in general, and not just healthcare, but good healthcare. That's the other thing is, like, most hospitals will have an emergency room, but do they have a pediatric department? Do they have, a department specializing in birth at all? Do they have a birth center? Probably not. So are they going to know what to do if there's an emergency and a mom's in the emergency room and expecting? No, we need to have better healthcare in our communities, but we absolutely have to at least have healthcare in our communities. One of the things that we've done here in the United States, because we have so polarized people, and as far as women's health goes, we have taken crucial services out of communities that have been so underserved. And I'm thinking specifically about an organization here called Planned Parenthood. We have closed so many Planned Parenthood locations because we've politicized women's health care. And so because we've taken organizations like that out of our communities, our women who would have had very accessible healthcare that's affordable and right there within their region where they can get to within walking distance, oftentimes we've taken the opportunity for them to see those professionals away. And so we need to, if we're going to be taking those services away, we need to figure out what we can re-implement into the community to take the place of those services. And a big part of that too will just be, again, managing the people around us. When we see that we have somebody that we care about who is expecting, kind of make sure that they have the resources, that they know that, like, one, there are resources available to them. And if, like, at the very least, you're here talking to us, so you know that there are doulas out in the world, you know that there are options for the people that you care about. So talk to the people that you care about their options. It's so funny. When we see pregnant people, we're so, oh my gosh, like, is it a boy? Is it a girl? Like, do you have this? Do you have that? rather than, hey, what did your doctor say? How are you feeling? How, what is your experience like? Like, let's have real conversations with the women in our world about what they're experiencing in after they've had their baby. Like we talked before, like not just focusing on the baby. When you go to see your friend, your sister, your auntie, whoever it is who has just had a baby, when you go see them, don't just scoop that baby right up. As much as we want to just love on them and love on them, how about we ask the mom, like, how are you feeling today? If we know they've just had a baby, text them, call them, check in on them. Ask them, how are you feeling today? And what is your body doing? What is your body telling you? Like let's not think that, it's okay to have extended amounts of shortness of breath after we've had a baby. Let's not think that it's okay to just, we know that it's constantly fatiguing to have a newborn and that sleep is hard to come by. But if we're experiencing such severe fatigue that we can't even go up a flight of steps, that's not okay. Like, let's check on our moms and their physical health. How are they doing? So that we can, one, see, oh my gosh, this might be a heart issue. If you're experiencing that kind of fatigue or that kind of shortness of breath, heart issues is a cause for postpartum mortality rate. So we got to check on that. If a woman's telling me, like, I thought my bleeding would be done by now, or I'm having a weird smell, or oh my gosh, that increased. Like, can we normalize having those conversations so that women know that it's okay to talk to other women about what they're experiencing in their bodies, even if it feels gross or weird? Like, let's have those conversations. That's one of the most important things that we can do, is like let women know that we could talk about the different things that go on with their body, not just the pretty things. And that's another thing that we could do, is we could stop effing glamorizing babies and postpartum and pregnancy. It's not always glamorous. Can we start talking about the real things, the sore nipples and the judgment that society will sometimes cast if we're not doing things just right? Or can we talk about how scary and dark sometimes those thoughts and feelings are? Just as much as we talk about, oh, look how cute my baby is, and let's get all these pictures for Instagram.
And I think that's important. And one of the things before we close the program today that I want to emphasize on what Papi said is, don't assume that you need to have this conversation only with a first-time mom.
Right.
Because sometimes you're like, oh, but this is your third child.
You got this.
You already did this twice. And we want to let you know that every birth is different.
Yeah.
Every baby is different. Your body reacts different to every pregnancy and every delivery. So even if the last 2 times everything was perfect for me, this time I could be finding things that are different. And then if I don't have that voice, then I could even feel ashamed of sharing, because I don't know, the last 2 times didn't happen and maybe I'm doing something wrong.
Yeah.
So important. That is so important, Papi. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, I just think about like how different I am at 41 than I was at 36. That's, or a woman who's 31 as opposed to where they are at 36. Like, our bodies change so much in just a short amount of time. That's 3 babies worth, right? Like, think about how different you are, in just 6 years. We change a lot, and we need to be mindful of that. Our bodies are different, and so every pregnancy is going to be different.
Thank you so much, Papi. It was such a pleasure having you here. I think that the time is just too short. I for sure gonna try to have you back and keep going into more the doula and the support for mamas. Thank you for doing this amazing work. You are being an advocate for mamas in the United States and in the world, and bringing this awareness that doesn't have to be like that.
It doesn't have to be like that. This can be a beautiful, awesome experience.
Every single time.
Every time.
So please stop thinking that it needs to be painful, that needs to be traumatic, that needs to be hard. Get the fear that you're going to die, because if you prepare right, and then you have people like Papi and me in your team to support you and have your back, your experience is going to be the right experience for you always. Yep. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out www.spanglish.ca for all the news and programming. Spanglish World, watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and leave it.